Hello. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. Hello. Okay. I think we are ready to get going. So we will forge ahead. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Livre Cano Books webinar on accessibility, metadata, and export. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabrielle Echeverry. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Livre Canada Books, and I'm just here today to present our speakers, as well as facilitate any Q&A or help out with any technical issues that might arise and hopefully won't arise during the course of the presentation. Before we get started with the presentation, the actual webinar, I'd like to just point out a few housekeeping items. Our presentation today will be in English with simultaneous interpretation into French, and it should take about 60 minutes in addition to time set aside at the end for your questions. La présentation d'aujourd'hui sera en anglais avec interprétation simultanée en français et devrait durer environ 60 minutes. Et nous avons prévu du temps à la fin pour répondre à vos questions. Pour accéder à l'interprétation vers le français, cliquez sur l'icône interprétation au bas de votre écran dans les commandes pour la réunion. L'icône ressemble à un globe et par la suite, sélectionnez la langue de votre choix. Dans ce cas, ce sera le français. So thank you very much to our interpreters for providing this excellent service today. For those who don't require translation, please leave the interpretation feature off. After the presentation is complete, we'll be taking questions in both languages via the Q&A function, should be visible to everybody on the screen. We'll also attempt a couple of polls today. We're hoping that the good forces of technology are on our side and will help those function as planned. And there'll also be a couple of targeted Q&A sessions throughout the presentation, just one or two. But most of the presentation will be dealing directly with metadata. So any questions about production or marketing won't be, if you have those, won't be dealt with here. It's really about metadata today is our focus. Of course, if you encounter any problems or have questions relating to the platform, please message me as a host via the chat function, or my colleague Elena Taillon, who's also a co-host, and we'll be happy to help if we can. And so those, hopefully, French interpretation is working for everybody, and those of you who are using the service are able to access it. Please let me know if you have any trouble. So far, so good. Okay. No news is good news. So we are very pleased to be hosting today's webinar, providing key insights on accessibility, metadata, and export. Discoverability and distribution have been identified as major challenges in accessible publishing, and with the implementation of the European Accessibility Act, Canadian exporter publishers need more tools and support to incorporate accessibility metadata in their feeds. So as part of that support, today's presentation will provide guidance on producing, distributing, and displaying accessibility metadata for digital book sales in the European market. But before we begin with the presentation, I want to take a moment to note that this webinar is jointly organized with the Association of Canadian University Presses, the collective voice of French and English language scholarly publishing in Canada. And this webinar is part of a larger project funded through the Canada Book Fund's Special Call on Accessible Digital Books, and a follow-up webinar with sort of more detailed technical aspects of accessibility metadata will follow in February, as well as a report in March. And that the report will be provided in both English and French. So please keep your eye on our communications if you'd like to take part in those activities as well. And thank you very much to our colleagues at ACUP for helping make this presentation possible. So without further ado, I will let our presenters today, Cristina Musinelli and Gregorio Pellegrino of the Fondazione Lia, take things away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, I think, is on your side. We are based in Italy, so it's evening here, but we are really happy to be with you this evening together. So let's start with telling you who is Cristina. Please, Cristina, introduce yourself.
Hi, nice to meet you. I am Cristina Musinelli. I'm the Secretary General of the LIA Foundation. There is a long list of hats that I have in different organizations. I think that I don't want to read all of them. I think what it's important to tell you that we are involved in accessibility since very long time ago, as we started working on that in 2011, when the word accessibility was very strange and not very well known as today. We sit in different organizations that represent different kind of organizations. So we work as a publisher, we work as a specialist organization, and we have a net also in the standard body. So I think this is a kind strange of combination that we can accomplish all together. I leave to Gregorio.
Hi, everybody. Gregorio Pellegrino here. I'm a software engineer, but more of that, I'm a metadata fan. So I love metadata, and that's why I'm here with you today. One important thing is that I'm part of the World Wide Web Consortium on behalf of Fondazione LIA. And within this tech consortium, we are working on some specifications on how to display accessibility metadata to end users. And so I'm co-editor of this specification with other great people that are helping from all around the world. And so we will tell you something about these specs at nearly the end of the presentation. But let's start with the agenda. So I leave the floor to Cristina.
Yes, the agenda, as Gabrielle highlighted before, and I really want to thank Gabrielle and the association who are working with. We'll have a very short introduction on the ecosystem where we are working, but the focus will be really on metadata, because there are many different reasons why you need to speak about metadata. It's important to understand why they are so important, how and who create the metadata, what means to manage metadata on accessibility, and why it's important to work on standard. And standard are really important if you want to display metadata in a very consistent way to end users. So we will try to provide you with a first overview of all this topic. The goal of the webinar is also to collect some of the habits you have and some of the information that you can provide us to make the second webinar, and especially the guideline, more relevant, not only in general, but to more focus on the Canadian publisher needs. So I think this is another important element. So if you will make question and we put a question in the chat, maybe we will not answer to all of them today, but they will be very useful for us to better prepare the next step of the project. So just a brief presentation of who we are. As I explained before, we are a kind of strange animal. We are a no-profit foundation that was created in 2014 by the Italian Blind Union and the Italian Publishers Association. Normally, this kind of organization are quite different and work really so close together. And a few years later, we also other organization will be part of the foundation, that is a Italian Dyslexia Association, because accessibility is not only for blind visually impaired people, but for many different beneficiaries. And the Italian Library for Blind Regina Margherita, who is a specialist organization in Italy. We have also 17 publishing company. That means 70 publishing print, and the most important library loan platform in Italy. Our goal is to make the everyone able to read in the same way at the same condition. So our main goal is to promote born accessible and mainstream publication. It's important to highlight the two words. One thing is to create accessible content since the beginning, but also the other important thing is to distribute them in the mainstream distribution channel. And this is where metadata becomes so important. We are part of all the standard organization from W3C, DAISY, ADR Lab, ISO, Editor, and Schema. So we represent we work in the standard organization who work on the content, on the format of the EPUB and DAISY and standard. We work in organization where the relevance is about DRM and reading solution, but also in organization where the most important thing is to define the standard for metadata. So this is important. If you want to have a nice news, the first number in the code list of Onyx in the code 1 is LIA compliance schema. This is why, this is because we were the first one who tried to display the metadata in the publishing ecosystem, the mainstream publishing ecosystem. And we were the first one who have a catalog who has all the metadata for all the accessible titles produced by the publisher.
Okay, so now I ask Gabriel to launch the first poll, if it works, so that we will ask you some questions about who you are. Okay, you should see it. It's both in English and in French. And so first question is, how would you identify yourself as a publisher or a service provider, an aggregator, digital library, digital store, reading solution, specialized organization, metadata expert, or other? And in that case, I will ask you to write in the chat or in the Q&A who you are if you identify yourself as other. Then another question is, how much do you know about metadata? So I'm very knowledgeable about metadata. I have some basic knowledge. Or what do you mean by metadata? And the third question is, you can scroll down and fill in all the questions. How much do you know about this digital accessibility? And so first answer is, what do you mean about digital accessibility? Or I'm an expert in digital accessibility, or I have a basic understanding of digital accessibility issues. So I ask you, please, to fill these three questions. And so then we can ask, I can ask, we are an industry association. Thank you. I think you selected others. So I ask Gabriel to maybe, okay, to close. Ali, maybe you have to scroll down for see all the questions. Not sure if Gabriel have to click to show the next one or. All right. Gabriel, I think maybe we can close the poll or move to the next questions so we can see the results. Let's see. We are on your end. Okay. So I think it's closed now. Okay, and we have the results. Great. Technology is working, and Gabriel too. So thank you. So most of the participants are content creators or publishers. Then we have some service providers for publishers, some aggregators and distributors, and then some specialized organization metadata experts. Wow, great. And some others. Then we have, how much do you know about metadata? and so half of you have some knowledge, basic knowledge, and the other half have some strong knowledge about accessibility metadata. Great. And then on the third questions, most of you have some basic understanding of digital accessibility issues, which I think is fine because we will work on this together. One thing that is quite important is to be clear and be on the same page about what we mean about accessibility. For us, accessibility is quite clear. It's not an interpretation, it's not a way of looking at things, but it's really connected to standards and to specifications. So if we say that a book is accessible, a digital book, an ebook is accessible, that means that it is compliant with the specifications for accessibility, which for EPUBs are EPUB accessibility and for PDFs are Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, meeting some levels on these accessibility requirements, and so having the metadata for telling which are the levels. So it's not a kind of interpretation, it's really a technical and standard point. Christina.
Just a few information as I highlight. The importance of accessibility is growing in the last few years because there are some legislation or convention that make accessibility one of the most important points. The first one is the UN Convention of Rights for People with Disabilities. The second one is a 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, where disability is one of the most important elements. Inclusion is important. And the third one is the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are an ecosystem that is considering accessibility important. We believe that there are many reasons why you should look at accessibility as an important element of your publishing strategy. There are the social responsibility element, as we highlighted before. There is a legislation, but we also think that you have to have in mind that accessibility means quality. And if you produce accessible content, publication, website, and application and apps, you will be able to provide better quality product and service for everybody. We have very important experience with Italian and publisher we are working with, where every time we work on them with them on making something more accessible, the result is something that's better for all the customers they have. And so the other element is to take in consideration that accessibility could be a very high business value, because you can offer the service that you sell to everyone, and you don't have to stick to specialized versions that are provided by other organizations, but you will be the main customer, will be your main element of contact. So you will have more customers than before. And I think this is very important. The European Accessibility Act, I think that you more or less have an idea what it is. It's an European directive that has a goal to create an European environment that is providing product and services to European customers in accessible way. That means that is a legislation that is done to make European customer able to access to any product and services without any discrimination related with disability. And this is why it's this legislation, it's important also for all the organizations who want to sell product and service in Europe, because it's a legislation to protect and to offer better solution to European customers. Among the different products and services that are included in the European Accessibility Act, there are digital publication and e-commerce website. That means that every organization who sells in Europe should have an accessible website, and every ebook that is sold in Europe should be accessible. There is a timeline. The directive was defined in 2019. By 2022, the European national legislation should include the accessibility. The majority of the European country has already implemented the national legislation. Some are doing that right now, but by 2025, all the products and services who are in the market should comply with the accessibility requirement of this directive. There are information for requirement for every actor in the publishing value chain. That means that it's important that information on accessibility and product and service must be provided by the e-commerce website, that the payment system should be accessible, and every solution to identify, see, sign, and pay should be accessible as well. So if you have a website that is selling content to customer, you must comply with this requirement. For the requirement on the ebooks, there are specific requirements inside the Accessibility Act that define the specific requirement for digital publication. One of the requirements of the legislation is that the end user must be aware of the requirement of what they buy. So they need to be displayed on the website of the retailers every information that describes the specific accessibility feature of a publication. This is done because if a person buys something, they need to be sure that what they buy is in line with their requirement. So the metadata are the way to display this information on digital platform and apps. So this is very, very important. If you sell accessible content, end user will be able to understand how accessible are the content for them, and they will be able to buy directly from your website or from the website of your retailer the same publication as anybody else, without have the need to require a different version to one specialist organization. I think for the legislation we have done, so I leave the floor to Gregorio.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, let's see why metadata are so important. Christina already told a little bit about that. So if we look at the supply chain of the digital publishing ecosystem, we can see that we start from the production of the publications made by publishers. Then we have the distribution channels, we have the aggregators, online bookstores, libraries, we have the purchase and loan services, and then we have the reading solutions. And what is passing through all these actors are essentially metadata. In a lot of cases, a lot of actors don't actually have access to the file per se, to the publication. They only have access to the metadata. This is the case, for example, in different library systems. That's why metadata are so strategic to build a good, accessible digital ecosystem. Because without metadata, ebooks are invisible. This is a screenshot of a very well-known ebook retailer, where we can see this product with no cover image, only a title, no price, no information about nothing. Will you ever buy this product? I don't think so, even if it's the best ebook in the world. And this is for generic metadata, cover, title, price. Then let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of an end user with visual impairments. If they don't have information on the accessibility of that product, they may never buy that product because they don't know if that product fits their needs. And for really getting into this, I would like to share a video that we made as Fondazione Lia. The first part of the video, then we can share the link to you all. I will try to share the audio as well. Let's see, should work. No, I'm not able. Okay, so we can share the video link in the chat, no problem, because we don't have that much time to see it together. So I will share the link with you at the end of the session. So we would like to make some open questions, and we ask you to reply via chat or via the QA session. And so questions are, do your platforms manage accessibility metadata? Is metadata displayed, accessibility metadata displayed to the end users? From which source does accessibility metadata come? Just to understand how is the level of implementation. So maybe if you can write in the chat about these three things would be great, you know, or in the Q&A panel is the same. So I repeat myself. Do you have platforms for managing accessibility metadata? Is metadata displayed to the end users? From which source does accessibility metadata come?
Just information, if you don't see the chat, you can click on the dots and they will come, post the chat and the answering question session.
Thank you. I see someone that say that the platform does not manage accessibility metadata at the moment. If you want to write in French, no problem at all. I'm not that good in French, but I can try to understand. Never had a French girlfriend. That's why I don't know French. No, just kidding. Okay, thank you. I think we can move on while you have time to write in the chat as well. So let's start in this journey, starting with who creates accessibility metadata. We will start with the creation, the distribution part, and we will end with the display to the end users. So as you may know, the supply chain in the publishing supply chain is quite a long supply chain. It starts from the author and it ends up with the reader. This chart is in Italian, but it's not that important to understand all the levels. The thing that is important for us is to understand that there are a lot of actors that are involved in making a book available to the end users, and this seems quite important for us. And also the editorial process is quite complex and may differ from one kind of publishing industry to another, like for educational, for professional books, for university academic books, STM, children books, fiction books. All those have different workflows, and so they may work in a different way. We also have different type of books with very different levels of complexity. We will see it in the next slides. And we may have different design and production processes. One may be XML first, another based on InDesign, another one based on open source tools. And at the end, we have a book. And we have many authors and actors that are involved in the process. And also publishers may widely change in size from small publishers, micro publishing, to big publishers. As I mentioned in the previous slide, this matrix that was created by Luc Audrin from Hachette Livre France gives us an idea of different type of publications and how they can vary from poor semantics to rich semantics on the y-axis, while here we have content-driven or layout-driven. And down here, we have art books, comics, mangas, and graphic novels that have poor semantics and layout driven. And up here, we have dictionaries and encyclopedias that have rich semantic and content driven. So for actually managing all these complex things, the people involved in making the accessibility metadata may vary from one situation to another publishing house to another situation. That's why it really depends on how the process is carried on within the publishing house to really understand who should be involved. We had this idea of splitting different actors into 4 baskets. We have governance, design, production, and distribution, and potentially, maybe not the governance part, potentially, every one of these may take care of the metadata part. And really understanding who should do this work is strategic to have good quality metadata at the end. So specifically, there are right now 3 different approaches to who should create accessibility metadata. One side say that publishers should or their supplier should create accessibility metadata because they are the ones who really knows the publications, how the publications are structured, and so what is inside the publication, and can describe the accessibility of the publication in a right way. Others say that a third party, a certifier or a quality assurance service, should do the work. That's the case of Fondazione LIA in Italy. We produce metadata for the publishers that are our partners. So they send us the publications, we check their publications, and if they are okay and comply with the standards, we produce the metadata for them. And others say that are the digital distributors or aggregators, those platforms where you upload the book for being sold on different stores, that should manage and should create the accessibility metadata. All these 3 approaches may be good. There is no right now one who is better than the other, but we think that some things should be taken in consideration. But before digging into what should be taken in consideration, we would like to engage with you, and so to have another polls. And so I ask, please, Gabrielle, to launch it. And this is about if you produce the ebooks internally or externally, or if you don't produce ebooks. There should be a poll here, I think it's coming. Okay, I can see it. So first question is about, do you produce ebooks? And if internally, externally, or we don't produce ebooks. Other is, how do you make ebooks available to the end users through our website that should be accessible, through aggregators and distributors, via digital lending platforms, you can select more than one, via trade platforms for digital reading, on online learning platforms called LMS normally, or other. Then we have another question. You have to scroll down. Who do you think should create accessibility metadata for books? The content creators, the vendors that are working with publishers, the aggregators or distributors, the retailers, digital libraries, specialized organizations, or others. And are there people in your organization with the expertise in accessibility metadata? So please fill in the pool, and then, I don't know, Gabrielle, when you see that there are enough response, I think you can close the poll and we can see the results, which are really interesting for us. So it's really interesting to understand how you work to better try to figure out what is the best way for creating metadata. Okay, great. So poll is closed. Perfect. So we have 62% that produce publications, ebooks with external suppliers, and 38% internally. Interesting. Then most of you sell the ebooks through aggregators and distributors, but also via digital lending platforms, and let's see, via trade platforms. Fewer of you through your website and online learning platforms. And then who do you think should create the accessibility metadata for books? Most of you think the content creators, so publishers. Some of you, 35%, thinks vendors working for publishers, and then fewer the aggregators or the distributors, and some of you thinks 19% specialized organization. And then are there people in your organization with expertise in accessibility metadata? Half of you, yes, more or less, and half of you, no, which is interesting. We should dig into who replied that you should be able to create metadata. I understand if you have the knowledge about, but yeah, please, Christina.
No, just another thing that we may discuss later is when you produce metadata, on the basis of what you produce them. So if you make some information in the chat, will be useful.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the experience in Italy with the publishers we are working on is that we produce metadata for them for accessibility, only the accessibility metadata, which is part of our process for the quality assurance of accessibility. We have checklists, and with those checklists, we produce metadata. But let's dig now into the challenges of managing the accessibility metadata. As I mentioned, metadata runs through all the supply chain. And so for publishers and content creators, they should be able to create accessibility metadata, or at least to understand them. For digital distributors and aggregators, they should be able to ingest. That is not that simple. They have to change, in some cases, their databases, their platform, to being able to ingest accessibility metadata, as well as books in print catalog. They should be able to manage those. And for digital bookstores or digital libraries, they should be able to expose these accessibility metadata both to search engines and to end users. While for reading solutions, they should display the accessibility metadata for the end users. So we think that there is a need for specific skill sets. And we have seen with our experience of more than 10 years in this work that an interdisciplinary knowledge is required, because who have to create the accessibility metadata should have a good understanding of born accessible and digital accessibility principles, should have an in-depth knowledge of the technical specification, meaning EPUB accessibility, web content accessibility guidelines, and ONIX and all that. Knows the needs of the end users and the assistive technologies they use, and should know the metadata standard. So it's not that simple to find a person that have all this knowledge, especially if it's not someone who is doing this all day long, if it's only a spare work done a few times per year. Because inexperienced publisher may create incorrect or contradictory metadata. Also, because there is a lot of data to manage. Let's think that most bibliographic metadata are the most important are, let's say, less than 20: title, subtitle, the author, the description of the title, the categorization, the price, maybe the bio of the title, the cover for sure. And I'm 9. I counted 9. Now let's think about accessibility metadata. In Onyx, we have more than 30 specific codes for accessibility. And we have over than 50 codes in the EPUB accessibility metadata. Those are the two main standards for producing metadata about accessibilities. So the number is huge comparing to the normal metadata, bibliographic metadata that is managed normally for selling a book. And we think that accessibility means quality. It is something that Christina already mentioned. And we think that as well as accessibility of the content means quality of the content, accessibility of the metadata or accessible metadata means quality metadata. And there is probably a need for an expert. It's not a work that can be done by everyone because the knowledge need, as I mentioned before, is really specific. Let's see the common mistakes that we find most often while checking the quality of digital publication. We see that in some cases, accessibility metadata does not reflect the content of the accessible file. For example, in the metadata, it says that there is MAFML, which means accessible formulas in the book, even if there are no formulas at all in the book. Or the other way around, there are some features in the book, like an interactive TOC or a page list, that is not mentioned in the accessibility metadata. Or we have the lack of specification conformance metadata. We have a book with some accessibility metadata, but we don't have the information to which specifications it conforms to. Or the other way around, we have a conformance statement, but then the book has major accessibility issues. Or we see a lot of accessibility summary. We will speak about accessibility summary in a few minutes, where we have metadata written down that is not listed in the machine readable metadata. And through the supply chain, we see errors like multiple publications, like two formats, PDF and EPUB for the same publication with the same ISBN, which is problematic because then the accessibility may differ a lot from one type of publication to the other. We see digital distributors that override accessibility information. We see digital bookstores and digital libraries that do not proper ingest accessibility information and do not display it to the end users, and reading solutions as well are not displaying information about the metadata. I think we don't have time for these open questions. I'm sorry. So I will skip to the standards part. So I already mentioned that there are some standards for metadata, and the main standards are Onyx, which is well known and used in the trade distribution chain. We have schema.org, which is also known as EPUB accessibility metadata, which are metadata that are embedded inside the publication or used for search engines, but let's say inside the publications, while the Onyx is metadata that flows through the supply chain, but is not linked to the publication itself. And then we have MARC. We have different type of MARC, MARC 21 and UniMARC, that is normally used by library systems. Onyx and Schema have quite a lot of metadata about accessibility ready, while MARC is starting a work right now to align with the other standards. And then we have the EPUB accessibility guidelines, which is a standard that tells content creators on how to produce accessible publications. And it is based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is the standard for producing accessible website that were, let's say, adapted or used also for ebooks. And within this specification was one mandatory thing is to have metadata within the publication for telling about the accessibility feature. So for the standard per se to which we have to comply, we have to add metadata in the publication. This is a risky business because we have multiple standards that may express the same information in different ways. And so we may end up with this shark horse, I don't know how to say, how to call it, that is a cross, you know, between different things and may end up with wrong information with a wrong result. That's why we think that machine readable metadata are really important. For example, what are machine readable metadata? Machine readable metadata are metadata that can be read by humans and interpreted by machine, meaning algorithms, softwares, computers, and all that. Why? Most of the accessibility metadata are machine readable, except one, which is the accessibility summary. The accessibility summary is an accessibility metadata that consists of free text, allowing the content creator to describe the accessibility characteristic of a book. Actually, over the time, the accessibility summary has changed its purpose, and now it serves as a information that should not duplicate information of the machine readable metadata, but should add information that cannot be expressed in the machine readable metadata. For example, with machine readable metadata, you can say if there are alternative description or alternative description are missed. While with the accessibility summary, you may say that the alternative descriptions were created by the author or were created by a specialized organization. So adding information to the machine readable one. Why machine readable metadata are so important more than a free field that is written by humans? Because machine readable metadata can be automatically interpretable by machines, allowing a better management and filtering of information. Also, because using accessibility summary to describe accessibility features can lead to inconsistent and confusing descriptions to the end users, because one content creator may write an accessibility summary in one way, another content creator in another way, a third one may use that field for another thing, so it's not really comparable. And also, with the machine readable metadata approaches, we would like to standardize and simplify the presentation of accessibility information to end users in different sources, different languages, different platforms. That's why we are focusing really on machine readable metadata. But since machine readable metadata are quite a lot, as I mentioned, more than 50 values, display them to the end users may be quite tricky, and I'm nearly at the end, so we have then the time to have some Q&A. That's why in the World Wide Web Consortium, within the Accessibility Task Force of the Publishing Community Group, we are working on how to display these machine readable metadata to the end users in a consistent way in different languages. So how to interpret these metadata that are really technical, really for specialized people, and convert and translate them in user-friendly explanations so that the end users can understand them. The work that we are doing we published the first version of this document 2 years ago, but then we understood that a new version was needed. And so we started working on this new version last year of the document. It's a draft right now, and it's a major change from the previous one. And the idea is to group those metadata, 50 metadata, in groups. And for each group, identify a name and identify a textual description that can tell the end user what that means. For example, we have a group for enabling non-visual reading, meaning that the user can use assistive technologies like screen reader in combination with braille displays or read alouds to read the actual content. Or we have another group which is made combining different metadata to tell the user that he will be able to adjust the visual representation of the content. So changing the font size, changing the colors, changing the line height and all that. You know how much those information are may be important to some of these end users. That's displaying metadata to the end users. It is something that we managed since 2011, and that's why we are part of this huge work in the World Wide Web Consortium. We started with just listing to the end users in a friendly way the characteristic of the books, combining some of those metadata, and displaying the LIA label, which is this one, on different websites, at least in Italy, that where if a book is compliant with the accessibility specifications, it displays that label, and clicking on that label, the user can get all the specific information about the metadata, so the specific part. But for doing this new work at an international level, we started interviewing users, identified their needs, and they told us that at the moment, since no accessibility metadata are displayed all around, what they do normally is that they, to understand if a publication meets their needs, they download the free sample where available and try to read the free sample. If the free sample is okay, they buy or borrow the publication. If the free sample is not okay, they throw away the publication. And so they ask us to have a clear accessibility information about the publication, to present it in a concise manner, in a summary way, but also in case they do not understand what that short way means, having an explanation on what we are referring to. And that's why we ended up with that structure that we are trying to realize with the guidelines. So the short name and the description. We also have seen during last year that there were a lot of national groups working on accessibility metadata and on displaying accessibility metadata, and they were not all aligned. So different guidelines, national guidelines were coming up, but at the end, it's difficult for international players to actually implement each national guidelines for ingesting and displaying metadata. So we made a lot of different calls with all these groups from France, Germany, Canada as well, Netherlands, and we suggest them to join the work in the World Wide Web Consortium within the accessibility task force, so to end up with a specification that is based on the consensus and on the requirements of all the players that are involved in this. That's the work that we are doing right now. We are raising awareness among all the stakeholders and you as well, and we are updating these guidelines on how to display metadata. and a good draft, stable draft should be available by the end of this year. Okay, I think we are there. So we started with the context, legislative context. Then we moved to, let's say, speaking about the creation of metadata, who should take care of it, the standards. This was not a technical webinar. We will have another technical webinar later next year. Then a little bit about distributions, issues that may appear, and about the display. I think we are there, so we may open the Q&A session, and you can write both in the chat or in
I think, Gregorio, there are some comments or information in the chat
Okay,
already,
sorry.
so they are not very, I mean, they're more information than question, but I think it could be nice to have a look at them. My impression is that some people is starting working on producing the metadata, but the display part is still very at the early stage. So this, I think it's an important point, because and the publisher, as we have seen in the previous session of pool, is the one who must produce them, but then the publisher are not the one who display them. So I think this is a very important element. And I also think that another point that was raised by Gregorio in the beginning of the discussion was we showed the complexity of the different books, because the metadata should not be copy and paste from one book to another one. That is a situation that we have seen in many, many different cases. Because they are not the same, because the book are not the same. So this is another element, important element to highlight. And this is something that I think it's important to highlight. And I don't know if
let's see in the
information or
chat.
request
Thank
in
you.
the chat. There was another
Okay.
question that was in the question, and I answered, but
Okay.
I don't find it anymore. Just a moment.
Yeah, about the platforms.
Yes, and also the platform should be aware that I mean, the metadata, automatic metadata flow means that you have to have automatic ingest and display. So the technology of the platform should be adapted. Is something that should be done on an automated way. So if you don't have the feed, you need to think how to include the feed in your metadata backend. So it's something that it's important. And the other thing I think it's important, Gregorio highlight many different working groups. This working group was mainly on trade metadata, but we are also, as highlighted in the beginning, there is also an area where in the library area, you are academic publisher, so I believe that aggregator and library are one of the most important possible intermediate customer, let's say. And we are working a lot on some Italian aggregator, and we are working with them. We have tested their website. We are checking the website, and we are now working very closely with them in the way that we display the metadata. We do this as one of the main activity as a service of the foundation. And we start with Straight Publisher. The catalog that Gregorio showed you was mainly done by Straight Publication, but the changing in the ecosystem are made such as that we are now working more and more with academic, but also educational publisher. That means to have also the reading solution in the platform accessible and so on. So
okay, there is a question about the interviews that we manage with the end users, if they are available. Actually not. They were private interviews, I'm sorry. A similar work has been done also by other similar organization or other organization working on metadata in France and in the Netherlands for sure. And I have to double check if their feedbacks are available. But if you look at the work that we are running in the World Wide Web Consortium for this user experience, for the user experience guidelines for display metadata, all that guide is based on feedback from the end user. So there you can see that. And someone say also that eBound Canada is doing the same thing as well. Another questions that I thought will be raised, but maybe this webinar is not that technical. So it's about passing the accessibility metadata from schema.org standard to Onyx and the other way around. And so one important thing is that there is a mapping between Onyx and schema. And we will speak about that in the technical webinar, but just to let you know, there is a mapping that can enable everyone to pass from one standard to the other. This mapping was lacking some values, but in the last year, thanks also to the work of Fondazione Elia with the organization that is managing the standards that is Onyx. The Onyx standard was improved a lot for adding a lot of new codes thanks to Editor, which is the managing organization. And so the crosswalk as well is improving right now, so that at the end you will end up with a quite one-to-one mapping from one standard to the other, even if the purpose of these standards are a little bit different. But for content creator, it is strategic to have a way to cross from one standard to the other.
Just another comment related with the survey with end user. We have done survey with end user in many different situations. What I think it's important to highlight that end user sometimes, especially the people not who are blind but low vision, try to ask for a very personalized one-to-one experience. So the difficulties of having this survey is that at the end you need to find some kind of general structure, because if you follow every single request, it will be impossible for you to manage it. So I think it's a good thing to listen to the requirement, but sometimes you need to be careful, because you may have too many different requests that cannot be fulfilled in automatic way. So it's a balance between the end user request and the possibility to do technically. This is the same if you, I think that if you will make a survey to your reader, sighted reader, on your website, you will have many different requests. So I think it's important to do. It's very useful, but at the end, you need to do some choices, and the choices are also the fact that people is not used to go in the mainstream distribution channel. So if the ecosystem change, every part of the ecosystem should find a balance on what they would like to have and what they can have. If you have mainstream publication, you have a lot of advantage in number of quantity of title, timely availability, better choice, and so on. Maybe you have to lose something related with the kind of very personalized service that you have by specialist organization. So I think this is something that it's something we do a lot of training in Fondazione Elia when possible, because funded by foundation and so on, also to train people with disability to access content that are more accessible in mainstream, because also this part of the ecosystem has different habits, and these habits are time to time changing. We have a very good experience, for example, with the work we have done with an academic platform that during the COVID period was unable to provide a paper book to students. And so the student, also the people with disability who could not go in the university where there is a special organization providing title for them, were able to access to the title in the platform. And the result was because the work was done very well by the publisher, that is in Mulino, that is an academic publisher in Italy. The result they had in feedback from the end user and also feedback from disabled people was absolutely not expected. The good feedback they gathered. And I think you have received the slide, just a pray. The information that are provided are made by us, so you can use for your internal use, but please don't diffuse them, and it's copyrighted protected content. So if you want to use a slide or a graph or so on, please let us know, and it will be important for us to have understanding of which use is done by the content we provide to you. Thank you. I know I'm speaking to publisher, you understand very well this kind of topic.
That's probably very well. I
Yes.
just wanted to I just wanted to add that once we have the recording edited and ready, we'll also provide that the webinar on our website. I think most of you who have participated in our webinars before are already familiar with that process, so you'll be getting an email soon with the link. I think we are close to the end of our time, so for anybody who has any questions that they weren't able to ask today, please feel free to send me questions, and we'll see if we can also add those to that webinar that's coming up in February. And of course, as I mentioned before, please stay tuned to our communications. If you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll get those notifications as they come.
And if you have for further requests for the technical webinar, if you send to Gabrielle and to her organization, even after the webinar, I think will be very useful to better set up what will be the next phases.
Yes, absolutely. This is just the first phase, and we're very happy that you're all with us.
Sorry, just another important thing. I think that we know very well the European value chain. So especially in the academic market, we know quite well all the actors and so on. So if you have any document or information about the value chain, how it works, the value chain in the Canadian market, the kind of aggregator you work with, the way you distribute content, I think will be quite useful to have as information. I don't know if there is any, we have some document for the Italian market. If you have anything similar on the description of the value chain in the Canadian market, will be quite useful.
Yeah, we have quite a few good organizations, associations also working on that right now. So hopefully they'll be able to also participate in that in this work that we're doing now. And we've already been, as we mentioned in the Q&A, have been in touch with eBound about some of the work that they're doing on this topic as well. So this is a really great time to be working on this. I'm very glad that there's this much interest and many people working on this at the same time.
Yes, and what is really important is what we are doing at the international level is because we know the end user can access to many different platforms. It's impossible for a person to understand the 30, I don't remember how many code list in Onyx and so on. And it's also impossible for a person to learn in every platform how this kind of information is organized. If you go on a website, it could be Amazon, Kobo, your local library, you have the bibliographic information are set up in a specific way. These are a lot of additional information to make in a very different way by everyone will be impossible to the end user to understand. This is why we pass from the accessibility summary to the metadata standard, because if any publisher write its own accessibility summary by himself, the people will never understand which are the real feature of the content. So I think this is another important element. So if you know that someone is working in this field and is not in touch with us, please tell them that we will be more than happy to work with other people and to share the information.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. So again, thank you, Christina. Thank you, Gregorio, for this great presentation. It's always fascinating to hear what is happening in this world, especially on the other side of the Atlantic, and see what what things are kind of coinciding with what's happening here. So that's really exciting. And as I said, if we have any questions or any comments that you want to share, you can always, for the listeners, please feel free to fill out the survey, and there's an area there for comments, or to email me directly. You should have my email and the presentation slides in PDF format in the email we sent out yesterday with the link to the webinar. And we hope to see you all, or see you all in February, those of you who are here now, and hope you're all doing well. Okay, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.